Always stay silent in these 9 situations, because in every one of them, the thing you're about to say will cost you far more than the silence ever could. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth, and he understood something most people never learn in an entire lifetime. The most powerful thing he could do in almost any difficult moment wasn't a decree, a punishment, or a clever comeback. It was nothing at all. Silence, chosen deliberately, was one of the sharpest tools he had, and he used it more often than his enemies ever expected. We live in a culture that treats silence like weakness, like something you fill because an empty moment feels unbearable. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself by candlelight in a military tent, surrounded by war and grief and men who wanted things from him constantly, knew the opposite was true. The words you don't say are often the ones that save you. Today, 9 specific situations where an emperor who ruled through plague, war, and betrayal chose silence, and what happened in his own life and in the lives of people living through the same situations right now when they finally learned to do the same. Stay for all 9 because the last one is the hardest to actually live by. If this is useful to you, subscribe now. We go deep on ideas like this every single week. Let's begin. Before the first situation, one distinction matters, because it's easy to confuse silence with something it isn't. Silence is not suppression. It's not swallowing everything you feel and letting it rot quietly inside you. Marcus Aurelius wrote pages and pages of unfiltered honesty, his anger, his grief, his doubts about his own competence, but almost none of it went to the person standing in front of him in the heat of the moment. It went to the page first, where he could examine it before deciding whether it deserved to exist out loud at all. He put the whole discipline in a single line. How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? Every situation today follows that same logic. Not never speak. Just don't speak yet. Not until you've actually checked whether the words are going to help or just relieve you for a moment while costing you something bigger. 9 situations. Let's go. Situation 1. When you are angry. Imagine a man named Dorian, 43, a hospital administrator in Cleveland, who has a temper that shows up rarely but lands hard when it does, usually in meetings, usually aimed at people who report to him, usually followed by a private, exhausting cycle of guilt that can take days to fully clear. The pattern was always the same. Something would go wrong. Dorian would feel the heat rise fast, and within seconds he'd be saying something sharp, something he meant in the moment and regretted almost immediately after. He wasn't a cruel man. He was simply someone who had never learned the gap between feeling anger and acting on it. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire constantly under threat, surrounded by generals, senators, and family members who tested his patience daily, and by every account, he was known, almost strangely for a man with that much power, for a kind of restraint that unsettled people expecting an emperor to explode. He wrote to himself repeatedly about exactly this discipline. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. He wasn't writing that to justify anger. He was writing it to disarm it in advance, to remind himself that irritating behavior was simply the ordinary texture of dealing with other people, not a personal emergency requiring an immediate, unfiltered response. Dorian eventually adopted something almost embarrassingly simple. When the heat rose, he made himself wait until he could count to 10 silently before saying a single word. Most of the time, by 10, the sharpest version of what he wanted to say had already lost its edge, and what came out instead was smaller, calmer, and almost never something he regretted later. Anger has a very short shelf life if you don't feed it with words. Stay silent until it passes, and you'll almost always find something more useful waiting underneath it. Situation 2. When someone is trying to provoke you, now meet a woman named Corinne, 36, a city council member in Austin, who spent her first year in office responding, publicly and immediately, to every attack a particular opponent aimed at her, correcting him, defending herself, engaging point by point every single time. It took her a while to notice that engaging was exactly what he wanted. Every response she gave him extended the fight, gave him more material, kept her name attached to his accusations for another news cycle. He wasn't actually trying to win an argument, he was trying to keep her reacting. There's a well-documented moment in Marcus Aurelius's reign involving a general named Avidius Cassius, who declared himself emperor in a rebellion while Marcus was occupied elsewhere, spreading word, falsely, that Marcus had died. It would have been entirely reasonable for Marcus to respond with fury, with a public campaign of condemnation. Instead, by most historical accounts, his response was strikingly measured. He reportedly said he would have preferred the chance to forgive Cassius rather than defeat him, and when the rebellion collapsed on its own before he even arrived, he refused to have Cassius's family punished for his betrayal. He had written, long before that moment, the exact principle that let him respond that way: the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Corinne started applying a version of this. When her opponent attacked, she simply didn't respond, not out of weakness, but because she'd realized the attack only had power if she fed it. Within a few months, without her fuel, the attacks lost most of their audience entirely. A provocation only works if you supply the reaction it's fishing for. Stay silent, and you starve it of the only thing keeping it alive. Situation 3. When you don't yet know the full truth, imagine a man named Leland, 52, a father of 3 in Kansas City, who once nearly ended a decade-long friendship over a rumor he heard secondhand, something his friend had supposedly said about him at a dinner Leland wasn't at. He confronted him immediately, furious, certain of what he'd heard. It turned out the story had passed through 3 people before it reached Leland, and by the time it did, it barely resembled what had actually been said. The friendship survived barely, but Leland never forgot how close he came to destroying something real over something that wasn't even accurate. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire built on constant reports, rumors, and second-hand accounts from every corner of the known world, understood how unreliable, incomplete information could be, and he built a specific discipline around resisting the urge to react before he actually knew what was true. He wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." He didn't mean nothing is ever knowable. He meant, don't act, and especially don't speak, as though a second-hand account is settled fact, when it might just be someone else's incomplete perspective passed along as certainty. Leland now has a rule for himself, born entirely out of that near miss with his friend. If he's hearing something second-hand, upsetting or not, he doesn't say a word about it until he's heard it directly from the source. It saved him, by his own count, from at least 3 arguments that would have been built on nothing solid at all. When you don't have the full picture, silence isn't avoidance, it's the only honest option available to you. Situation 4. When someone needs presence, not advice. Now meet a woman named Petra, 49, whose younger sister lost a pregnancy late in her 2nd trimester, and who spent the first phone call afterward doing what she always did when someone she loved was in pain, trying to fix it, offering perspective, saying things meant to comfort that instead, she could tell immediately landed as pressure to feel better, faster than her sister was capable of feeling. Petra caught herself mid-sentence and did something she almost never does. She stopped talking. She just stayed on the phone in silence while her sister cried, offering nothing except the fact that she hadn't hung up. Marcus Aurelius buried at least 4 of his own children, in an era when child mortality was devastatingly common, even for an emperor. He wrote about grief with an honesty that suggests he understood, personally, that there is no sentence capable of actually fixing loss that size. Nothing happens to anyone that he cannot endure. That line sounds harsh out of context, but read carefully, it wasn't advice he handed to grieving people around him. It was something he told himself privately, as a way of surviving his own losses, never a script for what to say to someone else's. In his actual dealings with grieving people, historical accounts describe a man known for quiet, steady presence rather than lecturing anyone through their pain. Petra's sister told her months later that the silence on that phone call was the only thing anyone had done right in the entire first week, because everyone else had been trying to talk her out of a feeling that wasn't ready to leave yet. When someone is in real pain, your silence, simply staying present without trying to solve it, is very often the only thing actually being asked of you. Situation 5. When defending yourself would only feed the fire. Imagine a man named Osric, 38, a project manager falsely accused by a colleague of taking credit for someone else's work, a claim that spread through his office faster than he could keep up with, no matter how many people he tried to correct. Every attempt to defend himself seemed to make it worse, keeping the story alive, giving it new details to argue over, making him look, to people watching from a distance, like someone protesting a little too hard. Marcus Aurelius faced accusations and conspiracies throughout his reign, men positioning against him, rumors questioning his judgment, whispers he could have spent enormous energy chasing down and refuting one by one. He chose instead a different strategy almost entirely. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. He understood that a reputation defended loudly, in the moment, rarely convinces anyone who's already decided to doubt you, but a reputation demonstrated consistently, over time, through actual conduct, eventually settles the question without a single argument required. Osric eventually stopped defending himself point by point and simply kept doing his job, visibly, consistently, letting the actual record of his work speak louder than any correction he could offer. Within a few months, the accusation had quietly lost its audience, worn down by nothing more dramatic than time and consistent behavior. Some accusations don't need your defense. They need your silence and your continued conduct, which will do a more convincing job than your words ever could. Situation 6. When your audience isn't ready to hear it. Now meet a woman named Yolanda, 55, a nurse practitioner who learned early in her career that some of her most carefully reasoned medical advice fell completely flat with certain patients. Not because it was wrong, but because the patient wasn't in a place, emotionally or otherwise, to actually absorb it yet. She used to keep pushing anyway, convinced that if she just explained it more clearly, it would eventually land. It rarely did. What she noticed instead was that pushing too hard, too soon, often made patients defensive, less likely to come back at all. Marcus Aurelius, trained extensively in rhetoric and philosophy, understood something about the limits of persuasion that shows up throughout his writing, that wisdom offered to someone who isn't ready for it isn't received as wisdom. It's received as pressure or judgment, and it tends to close the exact door you were hoping to open. It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. A line he wrote for himself, not as a lecture aimed outward at people he judged for not living fully enough, but as a private standard he held himself to. Yolanda changed her approach entirely. With patients who weren't ready, she stopped repeating the advice and started simply making sure the door stayed open. A brief note, an easy way back in, and silence otherwise until they were ready to ask. Wisdom offered to someone who isn't ready for it rarely helps them. It only proves to them that you weren't really listening to where they actually were. Situation 7. When you are tempted to boast. Imagine a man named Franklin, 61, a retired contractor who spent much of his career quietly proud of the fact that he never had to talk about his success. His work simply spoke for itself year after year to clients who came back and referred him to others, without him ever needing to make the case himself. Early in his career, it had been different. He remembers, with some discomfort now, how often he used to mention his accomplishments in conversation, almost reflexively, needing people to know how well things were going. He noticed, eventually, that the people most impressed by that talk were rarely the people whose respect actually mattered to him. Marcus Aurelius, holding more genuine power and accomplishment than almost anyone in the ancient world, wrote something that reads almost like a rebuke aimed at exactly this impulse. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. He understood that a genuine achievement doesn't need your narration to remain real. The moment you feel a pull to announce it, that pull is often less about the achievement itself and more about needing someone else's reaction to feel finished with it. Franklin's silence about his own success, sustained for decades, ended up being the loudest advertisement he ever had, because people trust work they hear about from someone else far more than work described by the person who did it. The things worth boasting about rarely need you to say them out loud. Let the silence do that job instead. Situation 8. When you are arguing with someone who isn't arguing in good faith. Now meet a woman named Marisol, 42, who spent years locked in an exhausting pattern with a family member who never seemed to actually want resolution, only ever wanted the last word, twisting each apology into a new grievance, escalating every attempt at peace into a fresh argument. Marisol used to believe stubbornly that if she just found the right words, the right explanation, the conflict would finally resolve. It never did, because resolution was never actually the other person's goal. Marcus Aurelius wrote about exactly this category of person, with a clarity that reads like he'd dealt with plenty of them himself, ruling a court full of ambitious men who argued for advantage rather than truth. The best answer to anger is silence. Not because the argument doesn't matter, because some arguments were never actually arguments in the first place. They were performances, designed to keep you engaged, not to reach any honest conclusion. Feeding a performance with more material only extends the show. Marisol eventually stopped responding to the bait entirely. Not coldly, not as punishment, she simply stopped supplying new material for a fight that was never going to end in agreement anyway. The arguments, without her participation, mostly stopped happening at all. Some people aren't arguing to be understood. They're arguing to keep you in the ring. Silence is how you leave it. Situation 9. When you're about to make a decision that matters finally, there is a man named Augustine, 67, a retired judge who spent 32 years on the bench and became known among lawyers who appeared before him for an unusual habit. He almost never ruled from the bench the moment an argument concluded. He took the matter under advisement even when the answer seemed obvious, and gave himself the space of silence before committing to anything permanent. He said near the end of his career that the decisions he regretted most in his life, a handful of early rulings, a few personal choices made under pressure, were almost always the ones he made too quickly, in the heat of a moment that felt urgent but usually wasn't. Marcus Aurelius, who made decisions that shaped the lives of millions of people across an empire, understood the danger of speaking or deciding before genuinely sitting with a question. He wrote his private reflections specifically to create that space, a place to think something through fully, in silence, before it ever became a public act or a spoken word he couldn't take back. Confine yourself to the present. Applied here, that means don't let an imagined future outcome or an urgent feeling in the moment rush you into a decision that deserves actual, unhurried thought. The present moment can almost always afford you the silence to think clearly before you speak. Augustine's rule, carried through 3 decades on the bench, was simple. If a decision matters, it deserves silence first. Not forever. Just long enough to be sure the words you eventually say are the ones you'll still stand behind tomorrow. We began today with a simple claim that in 9 specific situations, the thing you're tempted to say will cost you more than the silence ever could. When you're angry, silence lets the heat pass before it becomes words you can't unsay. When someone is provoking you, silence starves the fight of the fuel it needs to continue. When you don't have the full truth, silence keeps you from acting on someone else's incomplete perspective. When someone is grieving, silence, simply staying present, does more than any sentence could. When you're falsely accused, silence and consistent conduct convince people that arguing never will. When your audience isn't ready, silence keeps the door open instead of slamming it shut with pressure. When you're tempted to boast, silence lets the achievement remain real instead of needing an audience to feel finished. When someone isn't arguing in good faith, silence is how you leave a fight that was never going to end in agreement. And when a real decision is in front of you, silence gives you the space to be sure before you speak. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire through war, plague, betrayal, and grief, left behind a discipline built almost entirely on this one idea, that the page, the pause, the private moment of silence before you speak is where clarity actually lives. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Every situation today was, underneath it, the same lesson wearing 9 different faces. The moment before you speak is the only moment you fully control. Use it well, and the words you eventually choose to say will actually be worth saying. If this helped you see something more clearly, subscribe so the next one finds you, and tell me in the comments which of these 9 situations you needed most today. Take care of your mind. The world will take care of itself. Until next time.